to wrap our day with 3 amazing lightning talks. It's my pleasure to introduce all 3 of them, then they're going to go in quick order. Our first is Reese Pecot. Reese is the director at Google. Her mission includes guiding Google's stances on controversial content and managing teams that create rules to protect and respect users of Google's products. Our second is Andy Lipkis, the founder of TreePeople. For more than 40 years, TreePeople has created a greener future for Los Angeles by inspiring and activating citizens, along with governments, to plant and care for trees and harvest the rain, a leading light for climate resilience around the world. And our third talk is Dr. Kimberly Scott, professor in the Women and Gender Studies Department at Arizona State University, and founder and executive director of the singular ASU's Center for Gender Equity in Science and Technology. Founded by Dr. Scott, the center is a one-of-a-kind research unit focused on exploring, identifying, and creating innovative scholarship about underrepresented girls in STEM. It's my pleasure to kick us off by introducing Reese. Please join me.
So as a policymaker at Google, there's this thing that I'm obsessed with, which is that you can't really solve problems until you figure out how to think about problems. And maybe that's a little chicken and egg, but that's okay. Let's go back to a beginning, which is my beginning. So one of my first memories actually involves trying to solve a problem. It's inexplicable. I'm gasping. There is this rush of color, of sound. I'm gasping. It is inexplicable. So my family will admit to me that when I was 6 months old, my dad put me on the back of a motorcycle, and he drove the 150 miles from Berkeley to Yosemite. But they will also say, there's no way you remember that. There's no way. I guess I can say this to you, that existential problems have a way of sticking it to you. Scale was also something that came early. So the Filipina auntie next door to me, she had a plum tree. And the Hells Angels that lived on the other side, they had an almond tree in the backyard. And there was this guy up the street with snakes in aquariums, and he had a loquat tree. And I can tell you that I did not love snakes, but I loved those loquats. Now, this was not botanical studies for me. I knew what it meant to go to bed and wake up hungry. So this was survival, and a single tree, that was a partial solution. It was about the map. Now, my copyright attorney told me I could not show you a real picture of the Breakfast Club. So I found this. And the point was, actually, I didn't start school until high school. So it was this strange, alien, weird, angsty environment for me. But it was also this crash course that problems are really about people. Now, my parents, they were doing the best they could, and maybe they were young, they were black, they were countercultural, and they couldn't always put food at the table, but it was a place to debate STEM ideas. Like, how come the Enterprise did not disintegrate at warp speed? And it turns out the problem is actually not when it's moving, but when it stops, and they still haven't figured that out. Now, we would also debate Ray Bradbury's story, The Storm Effect, and could the crushing of a butterfly's wings at a wrinkle in time change the course of human history? So what does it mean to identify a catalyst? Now, as a policymaker for Google, one of my goals is to bring the best of human ethical thinking into the way our systems behave. And Google Search is a system. It uses the PageRank algorithm to determine what result is most relevant for the query that you've entered your search at any given time. But in 2016, something happened, which is we faced a catalyst. Now, when you've got 3 billion searches a day, this was actually a very small problem by volume. But from a user trust perspective, and how should our product behave, it was a big problem. Now, you might say, Google, it's not that complicated. Just don't say bad things. But the autocomplete predictions, they're based on an algorithm without human involvement. For us, that mattered. Because when you return searches based on when you return results based on what people are searching for, that's impartial. When you say, maybe we should change these search results, you risk inserting your own biases. So how could we stay true to our principles, but not turn a blind eye to this user trust challenge? So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that systems problems are people problems. So we brought lots of folks around the table, ethicists, lawyers, attorneys, folks who believed deeply, deeply in free speech, the children of Holocaust survivors, and there was this hippie from Berkeley in the room as well. And we wanted to figure out, and we were asking ourselves, well, how should this product behave? But at the same time, we knew it wasn't about a single tree. What sorts of principles mattered for millions of predictions? Were we in the right place on hate speech? Were we in the right place on violent predictions or dangerous predictions? And while we could agree on one thing, which was that we could better train our systems to reflect our values, we also asked, should we be the only judge of that? Were we sitting in a bubble? So what we did is we asked you. We built a survey into the product, but we also changed what are called our search radar guidelines, which is where 10,000 volunteers from around the globe help us to understand what a good result search looks like. So we were going to glean these insights and try to learn from them. Now, that's a risk. Should the crowds determine the lines between speech that is merely unpopular and uncivil? What about all these cultural perspectives that are difficult to reconcile? And could millions of opinions actually help you glean new, solid principles? But my question to you today is, how do you stay alert to maybe that small thing that actually starts to challenge how you're existing? How do you recognize that? Now, I personally am really blown away by the 100K systems map. That to me represents a recognition of an existential challenge, and then also bringing in new voices to solve those challenges. But there is a question, and that is, what bubble are you still sitting in? And what bubbles are you still sitting in? And what voices have you actually dared not yet include in the conversation? And what will you do with what you learn? Because when you bring new voices in, you've got new questions to ask, you've got new maps to draw, and you've got new identity crises to live through. Yeah. But isn't that the way?
Ladies and gentlemen, the infrastructure that we built to protect public health and safety and the economy from storms, fires, quakes, that infrastructure was built for a different climate than we have today. And we can no longer assure those protections, especially in our cities. That's the message that I was given by the head of California's Emergency Services Agency when he pulled together a group to try to begin solving this new crisis. But what are we left with to solve that problem? The infrastructure is community, people. That's what we do, is mobilize people in communities to respond when the system fails. Neighbors helping neighbors. We need to inspire, engage, support them in taking effective action. And we're doing it. One of the best examples of this is how we, TreePeople, my organization, handled 2 unexpected 100-year floods. The city of LA was completely unprepared when rivers of mud started flowing down the mountains and into people's homes and inundating them. People called for the fire department for help, and they were told, sorry, we've got nothing for you. But we stepped up, and before there were cell phones and internet and texting, we reached out to the normal news media and asked them to invite the people of LA to help. And they did. 3,000 people responded, students, carpenters, ham radio operators. We trained them, put them in teams and dispatched them. They built sandbag walls and diverted the mud flow, rivers, and saved 1,200 homes in 10 days. We've tested this and found it to work over and over again for all kinds of community issues. For example, Martin Luther King Boulevard. This is Eudora Russell, a retired school teacher trained as a citizen forester who dreamed of making King Boulevard beautiful, beautiful monument. She went to the mayor of LA and said, we should plant trees to take, this is what the street looked like, not so beautiful. The mayor said it'll take maybe 10 years and cost millions of dollars to transform it. She came to me and said, surely we could do better. I said, yeah, let's engage the community and do it in a day. We made a plan. King Boulevard is 7 miles and 52 blocks long. It took us 6 months to walk door to door for all 7 miles and engage them and invite the community. We got them out. On King's birthday, it was raining. The 1,000 volunteers that we trained in advance were deployed along all 7 miles, and 3,000 people showed up, and the skies cleared. We all planted. Every single person placed a hair in the hole, knowing that the tree was going to eat them and their DNA would be part of it. Essential relationship. We were done in 3 hours, but we weren't done at all. We stayed engaged with this community for 10 years, coming back every single month, catalyzing people to care for and water the trees. While the average lifespan of an urban tree in America isn't much more than 9 years anymore, these trees survived, 90% or more of them. That's the power of community. This is how the street looks now. Notice that orange circle. That orange circle. That was in the previous one. It's the same space. This is a green line you can see from space. No sooner than we had really established those trees, a new kind of science really provided a threat. To move the space shuttle through LA to the museum required that they cut down all the trees through South LA. We were able to save the trees on King Boulevard through that relationship and avert a crisis and bring environmental justice back to that community in the replanting what did get cut. So here's an oak tree, the engineering model for climate resilience and protection from pollution and fire. It was my STEM perspective that enabled me to see this as a solution. Its soil is habitat for over 300 species of critters that dig and drill and create a sponge and a tank that treats water and captures it. Many of these critters are the same critters that we take out of that soil and put in sewage treatment plants to clean our poop. The tree is just like that same machine. They recycle all the water on the planet that was here when the planet was born. And by the way, the trees are networked. Our challenge is that we build cities without the aid of our sciences. So we removed the trees and the natural systems and created all kinds of problems for ourselves. But we can put it back. A little bit more of the science. Think about volume. The first 1/10 of an inch of rain is captured in the tree's canopy, and then it's released to the soil below, that sponge. That area under that tree, a 100-foot canopy oak tree, holds 130,000 gallons of water in a flash flood. The water is captured down there, held, water flows across the ground into the tree, and the critter is treated from polluted water, and then they release it and resupply the aquifer below. So what happens when the tree is removed? We send a flood downstream. We send mudflies downstream, and we may lose that water from the aquifer and our system forever. So what do we replace the tree with? And its services. Bureaucracy. Different agencies who don't talk to each other, are not networked, who compete and conflict. That's what we have today. But here's what we could have. An integrated system that is networked, where people are working together and managing the ecosystem as a whole. And this is within reach. So this is how we're rebuilding LA. Building using biomimicry, great science, great community outreach to create networked smart cisterns that mimic trees in the watershed, plus real trees, spongy landscapes, at homes, at schools, at parks across the city. It's a whole new system. We piloted that, and it's working, and people want it. Our challenge is that our public agencies think that people aren't part of the solution, and they leave us out, but people, especially kids, are dying to participate and can. One last example. We reached out to these kids when LA needed a recycling system, trained them, taught them. They went home, translated the message to 80 languages, and inspired their families to participate, getting 90% participation when the rest of the country only got 10. That's a solution. So what we got to do is reach out and engage the whole community, really teach them, really inspire them, let them dream, let them go and take it to the streets. Because when we do this, we transform the 7 billion people who are viewed as the problem into 7 billion problem solvers who are inspired and leading the change. Thank you.
Okay, let's go. So about 25 years ago, one of my mentors, Jean Anion, she said to me, there's a question that she is perpetually asked, and that's how do we change educational systems so that they will be more equitable for underrepresented groups? And she answered, it's not by changing schools. Schools are just one institution within the community. We must do much more than simply change schools. And so fast forward 25 years, and we hear, how do we change the system so that it can be more equitable? How can we level the STEM playing field? We can't. I say that we cannot level the playing field. It is completely impossible. The only way we're going to have transformation and true equity is if we blow it up. We need to blow up the field. We need to completely transform everything that we have been doing for so many years if we're really serious about ensuring that African American, Native American, Latinx, and Asian American women have equity in STEM. Now, this does not mean we discard or dismiss the root causes. We know that some of the reasons that we are not in and persisting in STEM is unsupportive peers, hostile environments, culturally irrelevant programs and curricula, and having been a classroom teacher, not having continued access to professional development. We're among friends. So let me share a quick story. I was giving a talk at an institution, and they said, we need more women of color in STEM. We need them to come here and work for us, but we're not going to change our hostile environment. We're going to be unsupportive, but we need you here. And I said, well, wait a minute. Essentially what you're saying is that if we give and engender more women of color to have that can-do attitude, to oppose those stereotypes, then that's really successful. Essentially what you're saying to me, to this person, is that we get more women of color in that STEM pipeline, then we've been successful. No. Absolutely. More women of color need access to those technical skills. We need to know how to code. We need to know how to build robots. But we need much more than that. We need access to the power skills that allow us to build coalitions, that allow us to turn the tide and create a system where I am not simply contributing to the pink-collar labor system by my brown and black body being in a space that does not treat me equitably. We need more efforts in which women of color become the STEM leaders, not the STEM workers. So this means for us in the Center for Gender and Equity in Science and Technology, CGES, is that we are committed to research, advocacy work, and programs that are building not only girls' opportunities, but their communities to become what we call techno-social change agents. And that means we must work with teachers, peers, industries, and parents, because these are all actors within our ecosystem that we know are integral to blowing at the system and making sure we can have a more equitable one. And so one of the many programs that we have in the center is CompuGirls, where young women like Courtney on the left, she can learn how to engage in culturally responsive practices to become that PhD student in archaeology. Or Kyra, who graduated high school and learned how to build websites for Head Start programs. Or Mitzi, who graduated high school, first-generation college student, and is doing her Fulbright in one of the most underserved communities in Mexico. So when we think about success, how can we quantify it when we're talking about underrepresented women in STEM? We shouldn't. We can't quantify it. Instead, success should be more about not just one given unit at a time, one person, one individual's experience. That's insufficient. That's not success. And that should not be how we gauge our work, whether we're in industry, peers, or teachers. We cannot simply think about success for how well I tolerate an inhospitable, hostile system, for how big my shoulders are for knocking down walls. Unless we forget, patriarchy can wear a skirt. And so success cannot be just by my mere presence. Instead, we must think about success for African American, Native American, Latina, and Asian American women by how well I am heard in a context. How that system changes so that it becomes more just. So that I am paid at the same rate, that I have opportunities to become that leader. And that we are gauging how well I am incorporating my work with libraries, churches, mosques, and tribal leaders, and all those community individuals that have made me who I am. So in closing, when asked, how do we create that equitable system for underrepresented girls and women in STEM, I think of the movement that says nothing without us about us, or nothing about us without us. We cannot answer that question by simply inviting me to the table. I need the opportunity to set my own in collection and collaboration with you. Thank you.